The Wes Penre Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenre.com. Present time paper number 2, the year 2012. Looking forward, a deep dive into current ET situation, part 2, by Wes Penre, Friday, September 28, 2012, http://wespenre.com. 1. The machine world goes to war, the creation of super soldiers. Now, when we better understand how prophecies are made up and maintained across a timeline, see part I, it's just a matter of keeping humanity on track and have the majority stay on a certain predestined course for the prophecies to play out accordingly and per the plan. But what is the plan? What kind of future do the Syrians want us to experience? Well, we discussed that a lot in level I, and we'll build on it a little more here. The Syrians know they can't get 100% of the population on board, ready to endorse the machine world of the future. With very little research, it's easy to see where the future is leading us if we follow the flow and let ourselves be pulled through our nose rings. Billions of dollars is invested in nanotechnology, because those in the know understand that those in charge of the nano world are in charge of the universe, both the 4% and the 96%. It is very interesting to sit back and watch one invention after another popping up, seemingly from nowhere, and all at once, almost. Great breakthroughs are happening in different technological fields. It just to be that one big invention or breakthrough happened per decade or something of the sort, but now it's such a common thing that people don't even reflect over it anymore. It's become overwhelming for the everyday citizen to catch up with all the new technology, so it's just become widely accepted that technology moves forward in a rapid speed. In fact, most of these technologies are nothing new. They have been put on hold for a long time to be released when time is right. And the plan has been to release as much as possible at the same time, so people won't bother with where it comes from, they simply don't have time. So, from one day to another, we find ourselves living in a high-tech reality of which we understand relatively little. Unless we are technology nerds to the extreme, we may feel pretty lost in all the tech that is thrown at us. There is now a solution for everything, and you no longer need to think, some machine's doing that for you. And this is exactly how it's planned to be. Before we know it, we are dependent upon machines for our survival, and few are even questioning it. New and exciting technology is brilliantly presented to our youth to an affordable price, and the parents provide them with what they need, because the older generation, who's been busy working day and night for a living, multitasking and wearing themselves out before their time, want to make sure their kids are fit for the new world. They want their children to understand what they themselves don't, to ensure a good future for the younger generation. So, they have already brought us into the machine world, and the transition has been quick and smooth, because they know how the human mind works after all, they were the ones who helped to create it. So far, biological beings are still needed to do many of the tasks businesses require from their workers, but this will change too in the future. What the Syrians want to do, foremost, is to create so-called super soldiers, totally one with machine technology, and fearless. We will see how medicine will merge with machine technology as well when soldiers get wounded in war, and new, mechanical body parts are waiting for them to replace the old, destroyed ones. In the future, if we continue choosing this particular timeline, it won't matter which body part gets blown off, there's always a replacement. We have already started seeing this with soldiers coming home from war after have lost a leg, an arm, a foot, a hand, or whatever it may be. The replacements are now so sophisticated that after a while the soldier is fit for fight again and chooses to go back to the battlefield once more, sometimes only to have another body part blown to pieces. But why super soldiers? What kind of war are they preparing us for? Apparently, this potential war requires more than just ordinary soldiers who are mind-controlled in the ordinary fashion. This war requires soldiers who don't give up or retreat, even when they lose body parts. Are they preparing our bodies for such a task, or are they actually preparing our minds? The Syrian warlords think they have planned this very well, not only here on Earth, but also elsewhere, on other occupied worlds. They have no problem manipulating what they think of as the primitive minds of the Lulus, which would be you and I. They have 1,001 different ways of manipulating us into agreement with what they're doing, with most of us not suspecting anything. And as long as we agree with the slave masters, no one will intervene, because we become like them. We are their allies if we look at it from the viewpoint of universal law. This is the perfect example how someone can turn an otherwise excellent law into something bad by taking advantage of the freedom it is meant to endorse. I am talking about the law of free will. Only if we as a soul group get together and say we've had enough, other star races will listen and possibly come to our assistance. They more or less just wait for us to get together and do just that. But as long as we agree with the Syrians, wittingly or unwittingly, the law of free will is applied to us in our situation, and there is not much anyone can do. The warlords know this extremely well. It's like the saying that goes, no one knows the law better than the criminal, or no one knows how to read the Bible better than Satan. They know the law of free will on their fingertips and they use it for their own benefit all the time. And we are like little kids whom they hand out candy to, and we stand in line, impatiently, to get our piece. They have us wrapped around their fingers and they laugh at our stupidity. In the end, when we are trained enough and ready to go, we will once again be their foot soldiers, but this time in a much bigger war, the one against their arch-enemy, the Divine Feminine, and the star races who defend her. So this is most likely what they are preparing us for. They are far from there yet, however. It will not happen now and probably not in 100 years, but it will happen. They are mobilizing their forces and getting them ready for a war that hasn't been seen in this sector of the universe in a very long time, if ever before. Not only do they have 7 billion potential souls in their space army, counting the current civilization, but they also have their old colonies and more recent occupied and manipulated worlds at their convenience. But the Divine Feminine is strong. How can they win a war of that magnitude? Well, they can't do it only with numbers. They are also, as we know, vampires. They have already gathered a lot of KHAA energy from the feminine fire that was inserted in mankind once upon a time, and they believe they have grown very strong and are possibly pretty close to attempting a first attack. After all, if a few million people die in a first try, so what? Losses like that don't bother the Syrians. This is why I asked if this could be a preparation of the minds rather than the bodies. Yes, they create super soldiers who are mastering their bodies to the utmost, but that's not all these super soldiers can and will be able to do. They are also trained in nano-traveling. There are already soldiers like this who are quite multidimensional and interdimensional and can travel anywhere in space and time, and are trained in a kind of warfare the common person, or the common soldier, can't even comprehend. A few of these super soldiers have become whistleblowers and told the truth as they know it. And although what they say is pretty remarkable, it's just the tip of the iceberg. These whistleblowers only remember what's on the surface, still, few people believe them. It's sad, because if people don't even believe that, how can they ever believe the real deal? Well, whether they believe or not, it's going to be the reality for the next few generations. And after all, who are these next few generations? Think about it. It's you and I. How can that be, you may ask? Well, your soul is recycled, reincarnated, so you will be your own grandson/granddaughter, figuratively speaking, and you will most likely be one of these soldiers in the near future, unless you change your course. This goes for all of us, and we will go more into that part at the end of level 2. These super soldiers are trained to master their bodies, because if they can master their biokind, they can also master and totally discipline their minds. And once they can do that and are taught to nano-travel and time travel without having any fears or anything that holds them back, they will be extremely efficient soldiers. Believe it or not, but many of these soldiers, trained humans, have been to other planets and other galaxies, traveling in their minds, and even been on real missions where killing off star beings on other planets have been part of it. They have the ability to leave their bodies at will, and with their avatar mock themselves up as anything, even as forests. With this kind of training, what could they possibly be afraid of? Death? Hardly, because they already know how to leave their bodies, and if they need a new one, they can either manifest in their avatars/light bodies, or use a body in storage. There is no scarcity of those, either. However, there is one thing even these ferocious soldiers might fear if they only knew. And I doubt that they do, because if they did, they would cease to be effective, because the fear this little secret would create in such a soldier would be so strong that they would be horrified to go to war. What this secret is will be discussed a few papers ahead. The fear connected to this secret is very much motivated, because there is something that may be perceived as much worse than body death. But why on earth would the Syrians want to come down here and fulfill the Bible prophecies then, if they need every soldier they can get? After all, the Bible prophecies include a battle of Armageddon, earth changes, and the loss of an incredible amount of lives. This is very true, but fits the agenda perfectly. The Syrians need to be visible again and openly mingle with us. They need us to bow down to a king again, and they need people to trust them. What would be better than to come and fight off an imagined enemy, Marduk and his group, in an effort to help mankind, and then let the second coming take place? Those who survive will accept the new King of Kings after they've played out their little show, and those who were killed will be incarnated again, integrated into the new system after have had their amnesia implants in the afterlife, as usual. But where would they get all the bodies they need for those who get killed in the final battle? Well, this is where the alien abductions, DNA samples, and cloning comes into the picture, something we will discuss later in this paper. When the Syrians feels they are ready, our biokind, the way our DNA is structured now, will be obsolete, and of very little importance. A cloned society would not be a bad alternative for them. A cloned army with trained souls is an obedient army. If Hitler would have had access to a giant army of cloned, fearless soldiers, he most possibly would have won the war. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan talked before the United Nations, pondering what we all would do in case of an outer, alien threat, and how all nations on Earth would have to put aside all their petty conflicts and get together in a joint effort to protect Earth. His point was that if such a threat would be reality, we would at last get a one-world government and a united Earth. In fact, Reagan mentioned this on at least a couple of occasions and even talked to President Gorbachev about it, with both their wives present. So, what threat was Reagan actually talking about? Was he basically saying that they needed to stage an event, type Project Bluebeam, to unite the peoples of Earth, or was he talking about a real alien threat? In his essay, Between the Devil and the Returning Rock, Dr. A.R. Borden of LPGC suggests that Reagan may have been talking about the incoming A.M.E, which makes sense as things seem to be unfolding, if we also take Lord U2's statement to me into account. 2. The purpose of technology transfer programs and alien-human abductions. To refresh the reader's memory, technology transfer programs means that star beings land here on Earth, show themselves off as Greys, reptilians, Nordics, or some other humanoid or non-humanoid group, in an effort to contact representatives of a government such as the US. Preferably with the president him/herself present, offering amazing technology to the said country in exchange for something else. Usually, this type of manipulation is working great from the viewpoint of the star race, and I'll explain in a minute what this is really all about. Then, from the said government's point of view, the technology they are being offered is normally something that can be used within the weapon industry, or as a boost of their own country's technology. The star beings involved in this kind of exchange know exactly what the particular government wants or needs, and the aliens in their turn will have their needs taken care of by the government. Of course, the president of a country is not the person who is really in charge, not even in a dictatorship. A dictator always comes to power after they have been offered help from a superpower, more often than not, the United States. So, for a dictator to have backup in a coup against a sitting government, the new leader has rules he or she needs to follow, another form of exchange program. So the ones pulling the strings are still the Syrians and their allies, if we go far enough up the echelons of power to find them. This is why the star races with their TTP, technology transfer programs, concentrate on the mid-level of power, which is mostly clueless of what it really going on. The President of the United States, for example, only has so much clearance, and even people like Brzezinski, Kissinger, and Bush Sr. have much higher clearance than the President. The target for the TTP is often those who still think that war, industry, and trade has something to do with one nation trying to get, or remain ahead of another. The star race in exchange wants an agreement of a kind that it would otherwise be hard to get, and they do need an agreement to be able to defend themselves against more ethical star races, who otherwise could intervene and help us out of this mess. Instead, we are letting star race with the TTP get exactly what they want, although it inflicts on our freedoms and lead to more pain and suffering every single time. So, who are these star races who make these treaties with our governments? Well, it's now almost common knowledge that President Eisenhower made a treaty with the Tall Greys, while they turned down a more ethical treaty with another. That's just for the show. By the way, there haven't been any ethical star being offering TTP to our government. Also, these star races, who show themselves off as different kinds of aliens, even as humans, are doing so to confuse us so we again and again can sit there and wonder which star race is which and who is working with whom, when in actuality they are all working together. The star beings involved in TTP so far, I would dare say they are probably all of them part of the Syrian alliance, and all they want is to get our approval to do certain unethical things, so they don't have to ask each individual who is subjected to their often horrifying actions of permission. One thing the Syrians have asked for in exchange for technology is permission to abduct people. When they asked for this for the first time, which was when they met with the Eisenhower group, the president was shocked and said no, and wanted to have nothing more to do with this alien race. Then the Syrians said that it would be fine if they had permission only to abduct a certain amount of citizens, and that these people would always be returned, unharmed, and with no memory of what had happened. Eisenhower still said no, but some of his generals talked to him and said that these star beings would most certainly take what they wanted anyway, and there was nothing anyone could do about it, and then there wouldn't be any exchange, so the U.S. government would not get the technology that now was offered to them. This is when Eisenhower apparently made the mistake of his life and changed his mind and said yes. What happened next was that the Syrians started abducting people and had soon exceeded the amount of people they had been allowed to abduct, and there was nothing the government could do about it. Later on they found out that this same alien group had made similar treaties with other countries as well, who now also had the same technology and their citizens abducted. It has continued in that fashion up to the present day. And when the Syrians want permission to do something else on a grand scale, they have done similar treaties with the governments of the world. If one government refuses, the Syrians tell them that so and so country has given them their permission already and are now in possession of certain technology. Does the country they now are approaching really want to miss out and be hopelessly behind with their own technology? This argument often settles it. However, there is another aspect of TTP as well. The Syrian alliance really wants the governments around the globe to have certain technology in preparation for a particular future they are planning for us humans. This is a brilliant way of introducing it to the mid-level governments, and the competition between countries is boosting the effect of the TTP. Abductions is nothing new, however. People mysteriously disappeared long before anyone knew about flying saucers and visitors from the stars. Only difference is that in the past the abductions were sparser, because they were not as urgent as they are now. The genetic manipulation of Homo sapiens has never really stopped, and even when most of the Syrians were off somewhere else and there was only a skeleton crew here to keep us under control, this smaller crew were still working on improving mankind. Today, however, it's a totally different ballgame altogether. The Syrians are back and they are running out of time in more than one way, something we will talk about in an upcoming paper. Hence, the abductions are much more frequent than just 30 to 40 years ago. The Syrians are running out of time, and people who have been subjected to this kind of operation are more traumatized than they used to be and remember more. The kidnappers are getting sloppier. Also, I read somewhere that 1 American out of 20 or something of the sort believe they have been abducted by what they think are aliens. If true, that's quite a large amount. The abductions are not only about changing our DNA, although that's a big part of it. It also needs to be said that only so many of all the abductions are done by star beings, the rest are done by our own government, or in conjunction with the negative aliens. Some researchers and ufologists claim that abductions are being done by positively oriented star beings as well. Some claim all abductions are done by positive beings. This, I must say, is an insult to those who have had very negative experiences from these encounters. I would insist on that no positive star beings, or star race, would come here and abduct citizens against their will. They wouldn't come down here at all and interfere with our progress. Yes, I am aware of that. Sometimes an agreement can be made in the astral between star beings and a human, that in his/her next lifetime, they are going to be abducted for such and such reason. Still, I would argue that if such an agreement is made, it is still between humans and a negatively oriented ET group, although the human making the agreement may not understand this when the agreement is made. There are also those who claim that they have only had positive experiences from their abductions, and that they love their abductors. Some ufologists see this as proof of positive intervention. Again, I tend to differ. I do believe that a person in question, who is experiencing such positive things, is either given false memory implants, or is a typical example of the Stockholm Syndrome. The bottom line is this: if a star race is abducting humans, they break several universal laws. A soul group who evolves on a certain planet is supposed to be left alone until they reach a point where they are aware of what is existing all around them in other dimensions and are themselves star travelers. At that point, it's up to the evolving race to decide whether they want another star race to come and visit or not. Until then they are supposed to be left alone, unless they ask for help. And even if so, the help should come in a way that the beings on the evolving planet have choices and themselves come to the conclusion, i.e. a typical way of helping a person or a group on an evolving planet would be to let them face the real issue they have when they ask for help, so they know what the problem really is and from there be able to make a conscious decision how to solve it. We mentioned the super soldiers earlier, and we mentioned a cloned army. This is basically what most abductions are all about. The Syrians and their cohorts are upgrading our DNA with technology to make us multidimensional in order to build this futuristic army instead of letting us become multi-D on our own. The Pleiadians in their recent lectures are bringing up this problem, and say that this is something we need to be aware of. And again, abductees may come out in public and tell you that they have had these great experiences and now have all these ESP, extrasensory perceptions, when in fact their DNA has been upgraded with help of technology to bypass evolution. The Pleiadians emphasize that it's not just the purpose behind this that's important to be aware of, but to upgrade our DNA in the sense the star races are doing. It does not have the same profound effects in the long run as if they would have let us evolve on our own. Besides, if it's done for you by them, you are theirs from there on in a much more direct way than if you are just a normal citizen of Earth, blending in with the crowd. The implications of this is something each individual needs to figure out on their own, but I think that with the background material in this paper and others, it's not very hard to do. Now, there's yet another aspect to the alien abductions, and that has to do with our genetic code. ENKI and in the extension, the Syrians, manipulated already existing species on this planet in ancient times as we have seen in earlier papers. But if we go back far enough all the way back to the primordial man, the Namlu, there was a code embedded into our basic DNA due to us being part of the original experiment as guardians of the living library. This code is apparently tightly connected to the 96% universe and the true fire of the divine feminine. This code seems to be one of the last, if not the last, missing piece in the mystery of mankind as far as the Syrians are concerned. They know we have the code, but have never been able to break it. Not even ENKI and Ninhursag, when they had access to their genetic laboratories, could figure out and decode this code, so deeply embedded in our DNA. And this was the whole purpose with putting it there in the first place. The goddess understood that bad things could happen to us over time, but as long as our DNA/RNA is still present on this planet as a part of humanity, this encoded part, next to impossible to break, would still be a part of humanity, dormant during times of great suppression, but with the ability to empower the being when the consciousness of the planet is just right. This is what the chronometers hidden on our planet are there for. They were put there by the original planners, so they could keep measuring the mass consciousness on the planet, and when time is right fire off the codes. That is one big reason why the Syrians put our planet under quarantine. As long as they could not break this code, they didn't want any other star race to try either, or they would have the key not only to the living library, but also to connect to the 96%. So it acts like a double-edged sword for the Syrians. They don't want the consciousness on the planet to rise above a certain level, or mankind would be too powerful, but on the other hand they want the code that seemingly can only be broken if they let humanity evolve. However, beings who need to bring fear to their environment to be able to rule and control it are also themselves fearful beings and can imagine all kind of horrible revenge humankind would take against them if we evolve past their own awareness level. So, they have really locked themselves in at the same time they have locked us in all in the name of fear. Therefore, they have basically shot themselves in the foot. The more violent abductions are often attempts to break the code. On this subject, the following comes directly from the Pleiadians. However, we are the first to admit that far in the distant past, Pleiadian energies manipulated the genetic line of human beings, and were connected to the reptiles. This is what we have come back to heal. That is the purpose of our visit. From the same source follows. Others may access the formulas from you, and in exchange you will experience states of ecstasy, alterations of consciousness, or perhaps trips into other worlds. You may not realize you are emitting the formulas when you do this. Others who need the formulas will use them to replicate lives, or to re-establish systems that are being destroyed. When those codes of information or formulas are set out in existence we will be free because the codes of consciousness contain the songs of your own freedom song as frequency and broadcast from the cells of your body my emphasis. Here the Pleiadians are talking about our future, if that is the future we decide to re-establish. These are the old ways of the goddess, when we were the key, or the library cards, to the living library. It is evident that the Pleiadians whom Arseniac is channeling wish for us to take charge of this planet again and let the original experiment be re-established on a new version of Earth. According to them, our bodies, minds, and souls have the same potentials now to become what the Namlulu once were. And the spirits of Namlulu are still present amongst humanity. Yet another serious reason why some people get abducted over and over has to do with their bloodline. Some humans have been worked on during abduction sessions, sometimes since they were little kids. They are of certain hybrid bloodlines that apparently will be used, some as hosts for future star beings, and some for other reasons. Just like with channeling, where the channeler has to be strong and have a certain genetic setup to be able to channel safely without being depleted of energy and eventually getting seriously ill, these chosen people are apparently of the same type of stock. Typical example of such are Cyprian Rockefeller, whom I wrote about in 2009, and Michael Lee Hill, MLH, whom I covered in Level I in a specific paper. MLH is a very pleasant person and a talented musician, but have been used by different Syrian entities as well as the Greys when he was little and perhaps as late as 2007. He has talked about his experiences as positive on the most part and is quite casual about the role he is told he will play in the future and says he goes with the flow, but the 2007 abduction was less pleasant. He woke up in the middle of the operation in incredible pain, something he found out during a session with a hypnotist who does regression therapy. At least one of those who were working on him was a human, or in a human body, and is said to have apologized, thinking MLH was asleep, and said he would feel no more pain, whereafter he let his hand go over MLH's forehead, and he fell asleep again, with no further pain or memories of what happened. However, he told the hypnotist that he did not want to relive that experience, and the hypnotist took him back to present time. MLH's comment afterwards was that even during a normal surgery, there is a potential chance the patient will wake up, and that doesn't necessarily mean the surgery is evil. Well, that's true, but I withstand what I said earlier, why is MLH abducted against his knowledge and immediate consent? If what he is being prepared for is benevolent, why all these secrets? Still, MLH does not see it like I do, and it's not for me to force my sense of reality upon somebody else. I like Michael, but these are his experiences, and the interpretations of them are his own. He has all the right to them. Important to remember when we talk about alien abductions is that not all of them are done by aliens. In fact, it certainly looks like most of them are done by humans. Another effect the TTP has had is that some of the interdimensional technology we have received in exchange for human suffering has been used to abduct our own species. This is probably nothing new to most readers who have followed me so far, but is still something that needs to be brought up. 15 to 25 years ago, a lot of attention was being put on underground bases such as Area 51. At first, researchers claimed they had inside information that this was an alien base, where alien spacecraft landed and took off ever so often. Sure enough, when people traveled there to see for themselves, many returned to tell about how they saw UFOs hovering over, and taking off from the military base. Today we know that this is not an alien base, but very much a base used by the US military to try out technologies they have received from TTPs. The two most prioritized research done there that we know of are the testing of new aircraft, and genetic engineering and manipulation. I have stated elsewhere that the UFOs we can see with our open eyes are not spaceships used for interplanetary travel. In fact, very few of them are alien crafts at all, but human secret technology. Some of it is expanded upon from Tesla's inventions, while others are developed from Nazi technology, which they themselves got from TTPs. Others are based on more recent alien, Syrian alliance, technology, but nonetheless developed by humans. Still, I am sure some of the UFOs we see are indeed of alien origin, driven by aliens, and sometimes aliens and humans in cooperation. However, again they are not used for traveling between the stars or long distances. More likely, they are used for traveling within the solar system. If someone needs to go to other star systems, it is commonly done by nano-travel, using star lanes like Peshmetan. Military bases, such as Area 51, are up to so much more than just testing new UFO technologies. Deep underground, there are huge laboratories where the most bizarre experiments in genetic engineering and manipulation are taking place. However, this is not ENKI or the Syrians in particular at play, but our own US military. It's very doubtful if there are any aliens at Area 51 at all, and if there are, they are not stationary there, but perhaps only there to check on our progress. There are other military bases, however, where aliens and humans are working together, such as Dulce and the Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Whistleblowers have come forward on many occasions over the last 15 years or so, telling us about the bizarre DNA research done by our military, particularly in Area 51. They talk about humans with fish bodies, two-headed beings, and tons of other alive and dead prototypes, some of them preserved in huge tanks or test tubes. We are now at the beginning of becoming like the gods that manipulated our own DNA, only that we are doing it in secret, away from scrutiny, while the Syrians and the Aryans are doing it openly as a part of their own development into becoming founders. Our own military, however, is forced to keep these things secret from the public due to all the horrible crimes that have been committed when obtaining the tools for our DNA research. The same thing goes with the alien presence here on Earth. There are forces within government who are for the disclosure of the alien presence on Earth and in near-Earth space, but many of these people don't have the grasp of the mechanics around it and the consequences that would come out of such an action. Albeit, some people do understand and still want disclosure, because they find the whole thing disgusting as far as they're concerned. But these voices are silenced by those who know better. A full disclosure of what's going on, they reason, would result in great tumult. When people understand the crimes behind the alien presence, they want those responsible for the cover-up put to trial, or even worse, be thrown in front of a lynch mob. Another problem would be, how do you explain to an ignorant public what an interdimensional ET is? How can you tell them that most ETs are invisible and some live inside humans' heads? The military see great difficulties in this, especially as they don't have any solutions, and therefore, unfortunately, disclosure has to be slow, through people like myself and others who are willing to expose this whole mess for what it is. Lastly, there is one more type of abductions I want to bring up here, and that's the non-physical abductions, NPA. These are typically the ones where the victim says they have been taken by aliens, mostly greys, and have moved through walls and otherwise solid, physical objects and obstacles together with their kidnappers. In these cases the physical body of the abductee is left in the bed, or wherever it was located just before the NPA. Taken is instead the victim's avatar, soul, and the fires that make up the light body/avatar. The abductee may still talk about being taken to some kind of spacecraft, or to a room which looks like a laboratory. They experience the whole phenomenon as quite physical, although they actually soul travel. The purpose with this kind of abduction is simple: they don't need the person's body if they only want to program the person's mind. Unfortunately, people are so involved in their careers and to just make a living and raise kids that they feel they don't have time to get involved in learning more about all these issues I've brought up so far in my papers. What they don't realize is that by getting caught up in the Syrian career trap and all the rest of it, they are digging not only their own graves but that of their kids and grandkids, all whom they love so dearly. How come they have time to watch TV, football games, etc., but not for all the matters that really count? After all, I'm no different from all the rest of humanity. Not only have I dug into these issues, I also have found time to write about them, although I have a family too, and work 40 hours/week on a regular job. If I can do it, anybody can, and there are no real excuses for not learning about all these things and take appropriate actions, some which will be suggested in the last papers of Level 2. After all, there are a lot of star races out there who would like to intervene and really want us to succeed, and they don't think it's fair what is happening to us, but they can't do much due to the circumstances discussed earlier. Then there are others who think we should get a chance to prove ourselves to see if we can make it, because if we do, we will have what the gods don't, the experience of not only a regular 3D existence and the learning lessons that go with it, but also the chance to do it under severe suppression. This could potentially make very strong souls, and the star races out there know we're royalty. We are a very special experiment to begin with. We are beings of fire, we have the divine fire burning inside of us. 3. Cloning. I would say that cloning is probably the oldest way of reproducing in the universe. Like Robert Morningsky rightfully claims on his website, http://robertmorningsky.com, a male and a female are not necessary to produce offspring. It's enough with a female, something I brought up in an earlier paper, as well. The problem with cloning is that by default, the cloned version of yourself would look exactly like you, i.e. be a perfect copy of yourself, and as such being very prone to get the same diseases and weaknesses, but also, if a virus would find the perfect host in a being which is cloning herself, the offspring would attract the same viruses. We can go on and see how this would create problem after problem, while sexual reproduction is creating altered offspring with better chances to survive in the long run. Cloning is apparently still very common in the universe, but is now done totally different, as we shall see. Experiments with cloning have occurred for millions of years, even here on Earth. Versions of humans in the past were directly cloned from their creators, the Syrians, and the Aryan race Enki belongs to. Now humans have followed in the footsteps of the gods and are experimenting with cloning as well. Still, human scientists has a lot to learn about cloning, e.g., will souls attach to a cloned body? We know it would, if we understand the process, but the problem is that human scientists have so far not even included that factor into the equation and are wondering why they are not succeeding. Cloning life may not be wrong in itself, it is more the intentions behind it that makes it questionable at times. Every species as they evolve will start cloning life form, including themselves, often in attempts to expand their lifespan in 3D, until they come to a point when they realize that this is not necessary anymore, as there is no such thing as death. But, as long as a species is still in progress in 3D, a longer lifespan is helpful, even if amnesia is not normally part of a 3D experience. Here on Earth, as with everything else which follows Syrian hierarchical thinking, scientists who dedicate themselves to DNA research, including cloning, have no idea what is going on with the ET issue. Many of them don't even know extraterrestrial beings are present among us, while others don't even believe there are such things as aliens at all. And those above them in the hierarchy, who may know more, won't tell anyway, as things are always done on a need-to-know basis. Power and access to information have to be earned according to them, and with earned they mean being loyal and obedient to the system, wherever the system may lead them. Those who think for themselves have to stay on the lower levels. Too much thinking is dangerous to the system. Cloning, when comes to the Syrians in regards to human beings, we already discussed that. Creating a cloned army of super soldiers is one of the most important projects the Syrians are dedicating themselves to right now, I can imagine. And by experimenting with how the perfect human body would look like and act like is part of that experiment as well. This is why those secret super soldiers, who now come out in the open, have been subjected to such intense physical training, where they've learned to do things with their bodies that no one thought was even possible. But like the Pleiadians say, we have no idea what our bodies are capable of. They can do anything we want them to do anything. And these mind-controlled super soldiers have proved it. You can go to Project Camelot's old website at http://projectcamelot.org, which will redirect you to http://projectcamelotportal.com, and in their archives you will find interviews with at least a couple of those super soldiers, if I remember correctly. Some of these whistleblowers are quite upset with not being taken seriously, which is understandable after what they've gone through, but for the normal person, their experiences are not real, their neurology is not yet ready to take in such information. However, after have come out and risked their lives, they are being ridiculed in public and made fun of, and that must feel pretty insulting. Anton Parks has had first-hand experiences with cloning, but still, we know very little about alien cloning and how they do it out there in the Universe 8. He says he doesn't want to tell much about it, because he considers it very immoral the way it's done today here on Earth. According to Parks, and from the little he wants to tell in an interview with Karmapolis, he says that in alien cloning technology at its best, the cloners can program each body with the knowledge they want it to have so that even if the cloned beings look the same, their bodies have their own specialties or personal abilities, just like our own, sexually produced bodies. For that, he says they utilize crystals and various types of quartz. Quartz seems to be one of the most important ingredient when cloning, and in genetic engineering/manipulation in general. Parks says further that there apparently is a genetic bank on a planet called Nalokara in Ursa Major, where the Emotum, geneticists of the Mother Goddess, keep a storage for the genetic setup of all species created by founders, at least in this sector of the universe. The typical clone we know of is of course the Grey. Not all Greys are cloned, though, but the Greys as a species are apparently very resilient and used by many star races as servants, workers, or slaves. When we hear them described by abductees and others who have encountered them on military bases and elsewhere, one of the first thing that hits them is that they lack reproduction organs. People often wonder about that, and if they do it in other ways, but of course, they don't need any sexual organs if they are clones and don't reproduce sexually anyway. There is an important distinction to make here, however, and that is between a feminine star being giving birth without a male involved, producing clones of herself through unfertilized eggs, and those who are founders or creator gods in the making, cloning species, new or old, in laboratories. But there are a lot of alien races out there who are cloned to begin with, and some of them are no longer aware of who is their creators. Most commonly, each cloned member of this race has its own personality due to that they are inhabited by fires, building the light body/avatar, the equivalent to what we call soul, or in LPGCS research, information cloud. These cloned races don't go through evolution like we do on a 3D world, but as soon as they are created, they are ready to go, just like insects here on Earth often are as soon as they are born, not to say that these clone star beings necessarily are insectoids, that connection is irrelevant. 4. Springboard into a new era. With this said, I'm going to end the second paper on the current ET situation, this being just a simple overview, preparing the reader for the next few papers, before we end it all off with a solution paper. The next paper in line will be totally dedicated to prophecy and what kind of impact it has today, and will have in the very near future when we're ending off a 26,000-year cycle by the end of 2012 and start a new one in 2013. The energies right now are intensified almost to the maximum, but we still have a few months to go before the nanosecond is all over and time is going to start slowing down, and so will the energies. The year 2013 is a landmark, but of course not an exact time, although it's probably next to. The nanosecond is coined by the Pleiadians as an estimate when the maximum energies from the Sun and the galactic center are/were going to have the greatest impact on us humans and all life forms in the solar system, but it doesn't start and stop at an exact day. I think most people have noticed that time has sped up during the last 25 years, and at times it's been very challenging, at least it has for me and people I know well, or for acquaintances or friends at work. Few understand the dynamics of what has happened in their lives, but they all agree to that it's been intense and challenging on many levels. I hope you have taken advantage of this time period as much as you could and learned a lot from the challenges presented to you, because they have certainly landed right in front of our faces, they have for me, and I have done my best to take responsibility for what has come my way, and constantly tried to learn new things. Now it's soon over and the time for reflection is coming up next, and a lot of new decisions have to be made on a personal basis and as a species. This is where what we've learned during the nanosecond comes in handy, because if we have done our homework, we have the opportunity to be able to choose consciously for the first time in ages. We have learned to think in new ways, new neuropathways have opened up as have our chakras, and we have all become more molted, whether we realize it or not. If you haven't, you will within the next few years. So, let's take a deep breath and get ready for the last ride before it's over. This last ride may be the toughest for many of us, but we've made it so far, and together we can make it all the way, no matter what lies before us, if anything. I know one thing ahead of us, however. There are those behind the scenes who work day and night, obsessed with fulfilling prophecies, and the time to do it is now. Is it going to be another Y2K, where nothing happens, or is a unifying event going to occur in the last minute? It remains to be seen, but with all these energies on the planet, transmitted from 7 billion people, and the Syrians working on their part, something could certainly happen. To a large degree it also depends on the individual. For those who understand multidimensionality, it's now common sense that we create our own future in the constant now, and with each decision we make, we create a new timeline, which is slightly different from one we were on in the moment earlier. So, whether we believe it or not, we do create our own future. Therefore, choose wisely which thoughts you want to energize and make sure you only energize those which will give you what you want.